We're discussing the storm of controversy in the United States after a Florida neighborhood volunteer, George Zimmerman, was found not guilty in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin. Zimmerman was acquitted by a mostly white jury in the killing of the African-American teenager, forcing Americans to re-examine issues of race in this country. And we are discussing this story with our feisty panel. Hilary Shelton from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He's in Orlando. Also with us, Vanderbilt University professor Carol Swain. She's joining us from Nashville. Let's get right into it. We're going to get to the stand your ground law, but before I do, I wanted to ask Hilary to give me your response. This Norfolk NAACP president, Tristan Breaux, came under fire for a Facebook post last week about Trayvon Martin, and Carol's kind of alluded to his behavior too. So I want to get your thoughts on this. He wrote, "I wonder why it is that we are always willing to say someone who clearly had a shaky past was the victim. Are we blinded about why Trayvon was at his dad's house in the first place and why he wasn't at home at the time that he was shot? Please think logically and not racially." A lot of people asking for him to resign. What were your thoughts when you heard about that?
Well, look, quite frankly, the only aspersions I hear in that is that you're asking questions that should have led to the kind of conclusions that we have now. Trayvon Martin was very much visiting with his father at his father's fiance's house. He had gone out to get something to drink along with some Skittles, some candy. On his way back, he was confronted by someone that, because of profiling tactics, that decided that he must have committed some crime. There was no evidence or APBs out on anybody committing a crime in that area. Why was he trying to stop him? When we listen to the kind of language, quite frankly, again, in those recorded calls, what we heard was things like, "What are you doing here?" from Mr. Zimmerman to Mr. Martin, that I'm following him. They asked him to stand down, but he didn't. Look, the NAACP worked very hard under the Reno administration at the Justice Department, as a matter of fact, to create these community watch groups and some prototypes of that, some best practices. In all those best practices, we tell those who do community watch, and we support them very strongly. I'm from Washington, D.C. We have orange hat brigades. We want them visible and seen. But we also tell them a number of things, and the Justice Department recommends the same thing. They should not be armed. If you see somebody that looks suspicious, don't do anything, say something, call, and tell the police what's going on. All of that was fine. As a matter of fact, that's why it was not surprising to us that the 911 operator asked him what was going on and then asked him, "Well, where are you?" He said, "I'm following him." I said, "If you're following him, stop doing that."
Most everyone, I think, is aware of the fact that they told him not to follow. Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the stand your ground law if we can, because I know you had alluded to it earlier.
Well, and actually what they told him was, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. That's what they told him.
That's right. As a matter of fact, we'll send out a cruiser. And I bet he did not bother to tell the 911 operator that, "Oh, by the way, I'm carrying a gun," because he knows he wasn't supposed to do that either. So there's so many things he did that were inconsistent. My guess is the professor at some point has seen those best practices for community watch groups.
Well, if
you read that, you'll see this guy was so in violation along those lines. Why would he not be in violation?
Hilary, I'm going to have to interrupt. I'm sorry, because we're kind of getting into the weeds again. Let's talk about the stand your ground law. This was not a part of this case, but a lot of people feel like it was a part of the case. And of course, Florida is noted for it. There are 30 states that have it. And it allows people to use deadly force instead of retreating if they believe that doing so is necessary. Here's how it reads: to prevent death or great bodily harm to himself or herself or another, or to prevent the commission of a forcible felony. Although Zimmerman's defense did not invoke stand your ground, the jury that acquitted him received instructions that borrowed from that statute. Here's what U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder says. Now, he believes stand your ground needs to go away.
We must stand our ground to ensure that our laws reduce violence and take a hard look at laws that contribute to more violence than they prevent. We must also seek a dialogue on attitudes about violence and disparities that are too commonly swept under the rug.
Hilary, your thoughts?
I totally agree with him. Look, it makes a bad situation worse. Stand your ground actually moves the castle doctrine out to the street. It eliminates the responsibility of actually retreating first before utilizing deadly force, and then only using deadly force in response to other deadly force. One of the really scary things about this is it bases the utilization, or that is the fear of attack, on someone's assumption as to whether or not someone's going to hurt them. Now, the professor also knows, and I think you do as well, that there is a different standard of fear that comes into place when we talk about African Americans. Think about the use of Willie Horton during an election some years ago. Think about the darkening of even O.J. Simpson on the cover of a magazine. It's all to make them look much more sinister. We know we have stereotypes in this country still of African American men very specifically. All that.
Let me give Carol a chance to respond to that. Carol, what are your thoughts on that, and also the stand your ground law?
I think the Attorney General should stay out of this case because it was tried in the state courts. There's every evidence that the jury that was picked, the judge, they all seem, I would say the jury was picked, composed of women because it was assumed that they'd be more sympathetic. And the judge at times seemed like she favored the prosecution. And so, you know, this case has been tried by the state courts. The state of Florida passed that law through the legislature. We do have federalism in this country, and so I don't think it's the job of the Attorney General to go to our individual states to tell people what types of laws they should or shouldn't have. And as long as we have the Second Amendment of the Constitution, we have a right to bear arms, to have guns. We can choose to have guns, and in the case of Mr. Zimmerman, there's no evidence that he possessed that gun illegally. Now, the whole situation with Trayvon was a tragic situation. And had he not had the gun, maybe he would not have followed. Maybe it made him bolder. But I don't think the Attorney General should be involved at all. I think the administration is using this as an opportunity to change America's gun laws. And I think the race-monger leaders are using this as an opportunity to stir up the people, distract blacks.
Carol,
from the
Carol, let me stop you there
community.
for just a minute. I apologize, but we've only got about 2 minutes left. I want to ask both of you about this study from Texas A&M University. In it, they found that the states that have your stand your ground laws, the number of homicides have actually gone up and not down. They've gone up. Hilary, I want to get your thoughts, and then I want to get yours from Carol. Quickly, please.
Well, it's absolutely true. As a matter of fact, the so-called self-defense-related homicides in the state of Florida have gone up over 300%. Every other state that has these laws, the same thing has happened. Whether it's emboldening or just making it easy for people to shoot each other and get away with it. The bottom line is the only people that seem to be profiting from this are gun manufacturers and dealers.
Carol, is it the Wild Wild West?
Well, I would say that the people in those states need to look at those statistics and revisit those laws. But it's up to the states to make the changes, not the federal government.
All right, thank you both for talking to us about this, both of you for being very spirited on this edition of The Heat. Certainly appreciate you stopping by.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you.